and practitioner, whatever. It's all medicine for me. You know, there's this big debate about recreational and medical cannabis. It's a bloody medicinal herb. And if they want to say, you know, me smoking weed is recreational, okay, but I could even argue that kids coming home from school who go and have a bong session, they're just trying to relax. You know, it has this fantastic anti-inflammatory, relaxing quality that everyone loves. So, you know, we've really been lied to seriously. So keep an open mind, and I hope you have a great day. Dr. Deb.
Okay. Now, I must admit that, is that what turns me off? Yeah. I think they only got to press a button. That's a bit confusing. Okay. Can I do this? Okay. Well, I can just introduce myself. I'm Dr. Debbie Waldron, and I'm not currently registered through my own choice, and that probably won't change while the medical hierarchy remains what it is. But I'm also a cancer survivor. A little way into my journey with the medical board, I contracted a metastatic melanoma. Well, I'd actually had it for a while, obviously, and ended up going to Germany for dendritic cell therapy, and I'm now getting close to, I think, 5 years in remission. So I'd like to say that cannabis cured my cancer, but it was the dendritic cell therapy. However, I would definitely say that the cannabis bought me time, that it slowed things down and gave me time to act, because by the time I was diagnosed with stage 4D, it was through both lungs, and I had a lesion here, and things looked pretty bleak. And but heck, well, here I am. So what I decided to do today, I've just spent the last few weeks in New Zealand, actually. My son has relocated to New Zealand to be with his children. His wife went on holidays and decided, she was a Kiwi, and decided not to come back. And so she basically threatened the family if she was forced to come back to Australia. So, and also family law in Australia starts at $50,000, so it was actually cheaper for him to relocate to New Zealand. So I've just been there. And I was sort of thinking what to do for this talk, and I thought, oh God, I've got all these memes on my phone. So I thought I'd make a meme talk. I mean, you know, like, we all like memes. You know, they're funny, but they can also educate. And they also highlight social issues. So I thought, well, you know, I'm not taking credit for any of these memes. They're probably all copyrighted, and God knows what rules I'm breaking. But as long as I'm entertaining and educating, I don't think they'll mind too much. And I apologise in advance that most of the data is American. And I also apologise that the word marijuana crops up quite a bit. Now, I'm not sure, how many are absolute newbies here? Don't know anything about cannabis or medical cannabis? Okay, not too many today. Yeah, so basically, just to say, marijuana is a made-up name. It's what the American government coined it in order to connect it with the Mexicans. It doesn't even mean cannabis. It's actually the name of some dogweed or something. And so we consider that's a prohibitionist term. So we don't talk about marijuana, and you'll get funny looks if you use the word marijuana in Australia. They still do a lot in the States, but not here. So it's cannabis. If it's medicine or recreational, it's cannabis. If it's industrial or food, it's hemp. That's really the distinction. It's either cannabis or hemp. And then, you know, if you need to know any more, well, there's lots more to know. So I'm just checking to see. Okay, I'll just get the thingy ready. Hang on. I need another chair. So this will sort of take us on a bit of an odd journey. Now I don't know which mic it is. Oh, this one. That's it. Oh, what have I done with my mouse? Ah, there it is. Thank you so much. I can't do touchpads, I'm old. Like someone on Facebook sort of said, put up your proof, put your links in. And I'm thinking, if I could work out how to put a link in the comments in Facebook, I would have done it by now. For God's sake, I'm a baby boomer Gen X cusp. I can only go so far technologically. Okay. So, are we theoretically ready?
In theory, the emperor has clothes.
Oh no. Oh, you said clothes. I thought you said closed. We've got a beautiful picture of trichomes, but it's not mine.
Tell us about it.
We could do.
How do you know when they're ready to be harvested?
When they look like that. Well, is it still just loading or booting? I mean, the one time I do a talk that's dependent on fucking slides. I mean, I normally just get up here and talk, you know. I don't have anything. I can just about guarantee it. I mean, I could show you my laptop, but I don't think that's going to be as effective. We'll just feel, oh God, I've got to stop moving around again, don't I? I'm a terrible pacer. I pace. ADD, you see, can't help it. So, have all of you sort of seen the memes about cannabis? Some? Oh my God, there's like hundreds of thousands out there. And that's, I mean, I looked for a few, but basically all of these just came from what I'd saved on my phone. So it's a bit ad hoc. If we ever get it up. All right, well, okay, I suppose while we're waiting, any questions, any burning questions? Well, back then, it was only really in its infancy. So there wasn't a hell of a lot of capability of taking oil. So it was really just smoking. Vaping, when that sort of came out. I just sort of stock up in Amsterdam, basically. Just whatever I could get. So I just saturated myself in it. And that was sort of... And then as the years went on, then, yes, now, of course, I use oil. But I only use it really on a preventative basis. I mean, oil can be fairly obtunding. You like to function. So as it sort of, as things have developed, yes, we're using more tailored sort of things. And for cancer treatment, look, you still got to consider it as a type of chemo because you've got to take large doses, you know, starting with a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD, and you won't function, you know. I mean, a little pet name we call it is bed therapy because that's about all you're capable of doing. And, you know, you can attenuate that a bit by starting low and going slow, but basically to treat cancer you need to get it up to those doses. So in that respect, you know, it is like a chemo, but it's the only chemo that won't have any permanent sequelae. Oh, we're up. Hello, my name is cannabis. And I'm illegal because I can single-handedly destroy the oil, pharmaceutical, paper and cotton industry. So this is where we're at. Cannabis isn't the problem. Ignorance is the problem. This is one of my favourites. I gave them hemp, the most useful plant, and they made it illegal. So, you know, and this is, I think, how a lot of us are feeling at the moment. It's just like, you know, how can they be so stupid? But there we go. Now, and I mean, you know, we hear a lot about cannabis as a recreational drug, what with reefer madness and all of this sort of stuff, but, you know, there's lots of reasons why people smoke. I like this guy's explanation. I don't smoke weed to escape reality. I smoke weed to enjoy reality even more. I like that. I can identify with that. But it's also a very social thing. It's something you can do alone, but it's also something you enjoy doing with other people. And I can just imagine the night oh, it didn't go on to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Of course it's not me doing it. So, yeah, the colony is going to love me for this. You can just imagine the ants sitting around, after their hard day's work, can't you? Okay, so next slide. So this is what we've forgotten, is that the basic principle of any healer, it doesn't matter what type of healer you are, the basic principle of healing is first do no harm. Now that's something, as we know, with Big Pharma and just what pharmaceutical drugs can do to you. Basically, this is what doctors have forgotten. This fundamental rule of healing is first do no harm. And the other thing that's fallen by the wayside, next slide please, is that we've lost the right to decide what we do with our own bodies. So, I have the right to make my own medicine. I have the right to take my own medicine. I have the right to be my own physician. In my case, I have the right to manage my health. I own my body and I decide. And when I hear people coming back from the doctors, especially oncologists, and saying, oh no, the oncologist wouldn't like it. Fuck the oncologist. Like, really? This is what we need to claim back, people. This is what we've lost. And cannabis is the vehicle for it. But the passenger is the right to decide what medicine we take and put into our bodies. Okay. Now, when I was going through... Next slide, please. Now, I was going through this, and the biggest group of memes that I had was actually to do with safety. Is cannabis dangerous? Because that's what they say. I mean... Greg Hunt is still saying it, the fuckwit. He's still saying cannabis is dangerous and it will cause psychosis and all this other stuff that has been debunked long ago. But anyway, next slide, please. Oops, now I've lost one. Marijuana or cannabis is safer than family gatherings. Every year, 150 people are killed by falling coconuts. Cannabis still less deadly than coconuts. And we have a look here. And this is... Oh, next slide, please. God, I've got to remember to do something. And it's a really boring one too. It's not worth the wait. Yes, please. Okay, so here we have a chart of harm scores. You can see which one tops the list. I think most of us would guess that. And, heroin, tobacco actually doesn't come quite as bad as what you sort of think. But you're looking at harm to self and harm to others. So alcohol, of course, outstrips everything apart from probably methamphetamine. And if you'll notice, it's interesting, cannabis is sort of up there a bit. But remember, this is to do with harm to self and harm to others. Take illegality out of the situation. Where do you think cannabis would sit on that chart? At the bottom, right. So it's an interesting chart, and it still shows how safe cannabis is despite its illegality. But most of those bad effects come because of that. So, and an inconvenient truth that legal drugs kill more people than all illegal drugs combined. I think most of us are becoming aware of that fact. Next slide. Stoners, there's a reason why there's so many. And that's because no one dies from it. So all these hippies are going to be living into their 90s. They cracked it long ago, didn't they? So you can see tobacco, alcohol, all legal drugs, even aspirin knocks off 500 people a year. I've always found it very ironic that the drugs that you can get over the counter in the supermarket are all causing deaths every year, whereas cannabis causes none. And we're acting like it's the most dangerous substance on earth. So, next slide. Cannabis is safer than your smartphone. Now, I'm sure you guys have seen heaps more than this, so I thought I'll just put a selection up there. Well, I do like the one, I couldn't find it, but the one about it's dying from cannabis is as likely as being gored by a unicorn. And here, this amount of cannabis could be dangerous if you don't lift with your knees. And we talk about the LD50. Have anyone heard of that term? It's basically how much of a substance it takes to kill half a mouse population. And the LD50 of cannabis is almost immeasurable. And just to give you an idea of comparison, is that, you probably would have a bit of trouble drinking 118 cups of coffee, but let's face it, if you did trebles, you could probably do it. Very easy to kill yourself with alcohol. And very easy to kill yourself with water. I mean, most of us could probably drink 6 litres. I couldn't, but someone could. If a guy can, scull a carton of beer in an afternoon, I'm sure he can cope with 6 litres. And look how much weed it takes. So, you can't deny that. That's truth. That's not propaganda, that's truth. Next slide. And so really, cannabis is the only medicine that we have that does not include death as a side effect. There may be others, but I don't think so. Probably hallucinogens might come close, though you can perhaps die from other causes with hallucinogens, if you jump off a cliff thinking you can fly or something. But apparently that doesn't even happen that often. But basically. Now, does anybody know why cannabis can't kill you? Yeah. Okay.
You've got no cannabinoid receptors in your brainstem.
Absolutely correct. Oh, you'll have to come to the trivia quiz tomorrow, won't you? First after lunch. Yeah, she's exactly right. That there are no cannabinoid receptors in the brainstem. And the brainstem is what's responsible for your breathing and your heart rate. And that's what kills you with an opioid overdose, because it depresses your breathing centre. You stop breathing and then your heart stops. That can't happen with cannabis. The worst that you will ever get from a cannabis overdose is that you will green out, you will need to sleep, and you will wake up very hungry. So, I don't think we have any other overdoses that you wake up feeling better from. Well, maybe not quite better, but certainly better than the night before. Because we've all done it. Cannabis is safer than the Catholic Church. Thought you'd like that one. Yep. And Bill Murray says, I find it ironic that the most dangerous thing about weed is getting caught with it. How true is that? And just to finish with this topic, if you think this is safe and this is dangerous, you're part of the problem. And I think that's something that we're coming to realise is what people are part of the problem. So let's go on to cannabis versus the rest. What have we got? If the whole world smoked a joint at the same time, there would be world peace for at least 2 hours. Now, I know nobody's disagreeing with me. It's the nature of the plant, isn't it? It is not an aggressive plant. It doesn't come and attack you with its little 5-leaved... Actually, I should know the botanical term for that, but anyway. One thing it's not is aggressive. And I think when you're comparing it with anything else, that's the number one thing you need to remember. And next slide, and I love this one too. Fuck war, let's smoke some weed. You sort of wonder if they hadn't introduced the heroin and the hallucinogens of Vietnam, whether it would have just fizzled out because they were all stoned. Okay, and I love this. This is Kermit saying it like it is. So we have over this side the legal option, and we have over this side the illegal option. There's just so many inconsistencies in this, isn't there? So much hypocrisy. It's just extraordinary. But that is one of my most favourite ones. I just think that's gorgeous. I noticed you chose pizza. Okay, next slide. So here's a little bit of info. I'll have to read this off here because I don't remember numbers anymore. So basically, you do have 15% of drivers that are killed on the road have cannabis in their system. But 15% of Australians use cannabis. So that actually gives it a statistical significance of 0. However, 1 in 500 drivers drive drunk. But these... Oh, I can probably read it off here better. Jesus. Oh, dear. Yeah. So, as we can see, but that 0.2% are responsible for a third of all road deaths. A statistical significance of 150. So that is drunks are 150 times more likely to kill someone on the road than non-drunks or stoners. And I like the little comment at the end. So arrest us if it makes you feel better, but don't kid yourself, you're doing the right thing. And I think that's the whole thing about driving and cannabis needs to be looked at again very, very carefully. And so here you have a list of, I'll just let you have a quick read. I mean, and again, there's the legal one and there's the illegal one. Note the addiction rate. Cannabis is no higher than the addiction rate of the population getting addicted to anything. So you're talking about psychological addiction. And roughly 9% of the population are capable of getting addicted to anything. Cannabis is just one thing. So it's actually less addictive than alcohol. I'd actually even put that addiction rate higher for alcohol, but there you go. But as you can see, it's just a no-brainer. It really is. As this lizard will tell you, I just saved my liver by switching to medical cannabis. I like his bong. Right, next slide. But this is what we're fighting. Is it not? Here we go. They don't want legal weed. You know, they want to give us pharmaceutic cannabis. Now, one thing you may have gathered when you're learning is that it's the whole plant that does the job. The reason we have problems with pharmaceutics is because we have isolated molecules from them. And in doing so, we have taken away the protective elements of the plant. So those things that would attenuate the side effects are gone. I think the best example I use to describe this is aspirin, which comes from willow bark. Now, so basically all they really did, salicylate or salicylic acid is the active ingredient in willow bark. And all they really did was add an acetyl group to it. So it became acetyl salicylic acid, or aspirin. And in doing so, they did create a very effective anti-inflammatory. And it's still what I use for headaches because I can never decoct my willow bark in time. Like, you know, so back to the aspirin. But aspirin is an anticoagulant, as you know. And it can also eat away your stomach lining. However, in the plant, it doesn't do that. It has no anticoagulant effect and it has no effect on your stomach lining because the willow bark contains other phytochemicals that protect you from those side effects. So you isolate and you fuck. And that's what you need to remember. It's the plant, the whole plant, and nothing but the plant. I actually had a meme for that too. I thought I put it in, but it's gone. But then again, I was doing this rather late last night. Okay, and here's the other bit of utter hypocrisy, especially where children are concerned. You know, and in Australia, it's not so much the problem with narcotics, it's with anti-epileptics. I mean, I know children in Queensland are given non-approved anti-epileptics and totally refuse to allow them to use any other type of cannabinoid medicine than Epidiolex, which is semi-synthetic CBD isolate. So this is what they want to do, is give children drugs that are not even approved for use in children because nothing else will help their seizures, and flatly refusing to allow them to have medical cannabis, even in an environment where the law says they can. So, you know, this to me is the more serious side of it. And I mean, and I know this is American, but I mean, basically, is you still trust the TGA? Because they do the same thing here. It's exactly the same. So we have, you know, you've got an opioid approved for children, but you still can't use the cannabis for their seizures unless you have a hell of a lot of money and happen to find a doctor that's willing to go through the extraordinary amount of paperwork, or go and get ripped off by one of the medical access clinics. Not a lot of choice. Now, this one I just put here because I thought this was interesting. Just have a read. So, you know, we are part of the problem too. I mean, you know, myself, I just said, you know, like, my headache was too bad to decoct my willow bark. So I went for the big pharma product. But really, it's just a pretty interesting thing. And I mean, how often do doctors give you other drugs to counteract the side effects of the drugs you've been given? And it just goes on, when you could possibly replace the whole bloody lot with cannabis. And I don't think I don't need to say any more there. I just think it's really cute. He's the murderer. And it's true. It is. Cannabis is nowhere near, even smoking cannabis is nowhere near as harmful to the lungs. Yes, cannabis smoke still contains tar, still contains other things that probably aren't too good for your lungs, but it also contains cannabinoids that protect your lungs. So it's a bit of a, you know, it's a bit of a toss-up. I mean, the solution is vaping, but since the media's got a hold of vaping and turned the whole lot into this whole big evil thing about vaping, instead of what the adulterants were that were causing the problem, vaping, just your pure cannabis, is still the best way to smoke it. You know, there's really no doubt about that. But of course, you know, don't buy the cartridges of CBD that contain adulterants. You know, you just have to be wise shoppers. And there's a lot of shit coming out of China. A lot. It mainly floods the US market, but gets here too. A lot of the synthetic opioids come out of China. They make a molecule, it kills hundreds of people in the States. They make that molecule illegal, then they make another one and flood the States with it, and so it goes. Here we go. Oh, hang on, skip one. Back one. So, and we can even compare soft drink to cannabis. And I mean, you know, like one thing that really bugs me is when you get a soft drink that's meant to not be a diet drink and you look on the label and it has an artificial sweetener in it. I think, why? Why? It's got sugar in it. Why do you need to add an artificial sweetener to that? But anyway, so that's that one. So this, and I do like this. Next slide, yep. And I think that sums it up. Doesn't it? Because we certainly know it doesn't kill anyone. So, okay, it can't kill you. But what else is it good for? So here we get on to the uses of cannabis species. There we go. I think most of us are pretty aware now of the uses. So you have your textiles, your plastics, beer and wine. Must admit that one's... Who can enlighten me on how you would use it for beer and wine? No one? Why mix it with alcohol? Anyway, superior food. I mean, and as you know, that's one small battle we've won. We can now eat it. Hemp, anyway. And that's another thing to realise, that the hemp you get as food comes from the seed of the hemp plant. The oil and the hulled hemp and the hemp powder. The hemp powder is the protein. The hulled hemp is just the seed with the outer coating removed. And The hemp seed oil is the pressed oil out of the seed. So there is cannot be any psychoactivity. It is a food. It's a superfood because it's a complete protein. It contains all the essential amino acids. Oh, it's a bit low on one, but pretty much complete. And it has a omega profile that mimics what our cell membranes have. So a lot of people say, oh, it's got omega-6 in it and that's really inflammatory and rah, rah, rah. It's the ratio that's important. You need omega-6 and 9. So these are just slightly different fatty acids that the body needs. And cannabis has that in the same ratio as what's in our cell membranes. And that's where everything happens in the body, is at the cell membrane. That's where all your receptors are. You've pretty heard about receptors, you know, the CBD receptors. You've got CB1 and CB2. Well, that's where they sit, in the cell membrane. We'll get into that in a minute anyway. Okay, so just, oops, I've gone backwards on mine. So hemp is the strongest natural fibre in the world. It can be explained largely just by the length of the fibre. You know, a hemp fibre will be like a metre long, whereas, of course, with cotton it's just little bits. So that gives it properties. So it makes stronger textiles, it makes stronger paper. And you've just got, oh, look, there's just so much you can do. Now, my husband would probably he's a farmer, have a few words to say about this slide. And look, if you're going to grow any crop as a single plant, you are going to get pests, you are going to get diseases. It doesn't matter what plant that is. If you create a single ecosystem of one plant, you disrupt the natural ecosystem and you will have problems. And it's the same with hemp farming. So it may not be completely pesticide-free, but it's the choices of pesticide. It's the choices of things that you put on it that would make it, you know, sort of organic or not organic. But I think, to be realistic, it still uses water, just not as much as cotton. So it's a bioaccumulator. It cleans the soil. But so do legume crops, like chickpeas and things like that. You know, so it's not the be-all and end-all. But I believe that it's a much better crop than cotton. And I won't go back on that one. But I think I've sort of, you know, hopefully he'll be happy with that explanation. And again, trees versus hemp, and I think the main thing to notice here is the time to creation. And so this is what we're facing, you know, by destroying so much of our tree canopy in our world, is the time it takes to recreate it. Whereas a hemp crop takes 20 weeks. And you can get 3 a year, if you're lucky. You know, and I mean, you can see, it's just, there's no comparison. We could go into the history of it, but I think Michael wants me to be short today. I don't know how he's ever going to expect that to happen. And this is hempcrete, which I'm hoping will be the building block of the future. So we get on to medical cannabis, and it's the healing path. Oh, I didn't think that was going to come up really well, but I just thought that was a really beautiful picture. And for a lot of people, it is the healing path, isn't it? It's extraordinary. And I mean, and it's not a modern thing at all. I mean, this is a medicine that's been used for thousands of years. And this is just a little, yeah, that's what you used to get. Cannabis indica tincture. And I mean, that's part of the reason why Anne Slinger of the FBI had to coin this word marijuana, so that the average person in America wouldn't realise that it was the harmless cannabis tincture they had in their medicine cabinets. So it was very evil. What they did was just so evil. I mean, when you think, people like shoot me down when I say this, but I mean, Hitler and Stalin, all they did was kill millions and millions of people. DuPont, Hearst and Slinger, they destroyed our planet. They locked us into using fossil fuels. They locked us into destroying trees for paper and for building. They locked us into all those things while, you know, this is what... I mean, we wouldn't have any problem with Islam if they didn't own the oil. So if we weren't dependent on fossil fuels, Just imagine how different our world would be. So when you say who are the criminals of the 20th century, I reckon DuPont and his cronies would have to be up there as the worst. The others only killed people. They'll be born again. But these people are helping kill our planet. And this is what we're fighting now. And people, talking about climate change, it's irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. It's a red herring. For God's sake, we've got to stop raping our planet. Anyway, I won't get onto that rave. So here's a nice little one, for cannabis. And that's basically a lot of the things it can do. Now, I sort of think to myself, would my children have survived had I not had access to cannabis? And I think there's a lot of mums that can actually identify with that one and, oh, how disgusting is that? But is it? You know that she'll get off and give that kid a go eventually. He just has to wait, learn patience. So we know there's lots and lots of medical uses. With Granny's new glaucoma prescription, there was finally peace in the house. So yes, glaucoma was actually the condition that, the very few people in America actually got it for legally all these years was for glaucoma, which is the build-up of pressure at the back of the eye. Cannabis, the medicine is so great that most people take it just for the side effects. Yes. And of course, this is the growing population of cannabis users. And there's another one, and for the life of me I couldn't find it, which is quite similar, which says, oh, my joints are stiff today. And she responds, well, you're rolling them too tight. So, and it is. This is what... And there's very interesting studies coming out to show that while cannabis can certainly interfere with cognition in adolescence, though it's not permanent, it actually improves cognition when you use cannabis as an older person. So there you go. You want to prevent dementia? You know what to do. Okay, so we've got some newbies. So I'll just very briefly go through why it's a medicine. And it's because we have a thing in our bodies called the endocannabinoid system. And very briefly, it's a neurotransmitter system, which means it travels in our central nervous system. Well, not just there, but that's where the endocannabinoids are produced. And it's a regulatory system. It acts a bit like a graphic equaliser on a stereo where you've got dopamine, your serotonin, your endorphins and all those other neurotransmitter systems. Well, the endocannabinoid system works to equalise it all, as a fine tuner. And the way that it does this is really interesting. It uses a thing called retrograde transmission across the nerve synapse. So the signal goes across and it says, oh, there's too much of this. And so it produces then the endocannabinoid, the anandamide or 2-AG. It travels back across the synapse, connects to a receptor there and tones the thing down. And this is an ingenious, nature is so amazing. It's an ingenious way of providing fine-tuning. And the reason it took them so long to find the natural endocannabinoids is because they're only produced at the time they're needed. So the circulating levels are very low. Unlike, of course, exogenous cannabinoids, where the effect can last for a day and a half if you overdose yourself. So what we had was we had a rapid succession of things in the late 70s and 80s, where they discovered THC and then CBD, and then discovered the receptors, and then discovered the endocannabinoids. And this was actually the medical discovery of the 1980s. This was a whole new neurotransmitter system. And we were taught nothing as doctors, nothing. It was mentioned, oh yes, there could be this thing called an endocannabinoid system, but... and that was one of the things that made the old scales fall from my eyes, I can tell you. So, and it looks like we're now building up our numbers of receptors. We always knew there was going to be more than two. CB1 is found in the central nervous system. CB2 is found in the immune system, but it's a very rough sort of... So THC will act on CB1, CBD will act on CB2. But there's actually a bit of overlap, and you do find CB1 receptors elsewhere. Like CB1 receptors are actually found in every organ. Anywhere that there's a nerve, you can find CB1 receptors. And the same with CB2. It's not just the immune system, it's also still throughout the central nervous system as well. So, and it looks like they've discovered a few more, which may not be solely just for cannabinoids. That they will interact with that receptor, but other things can interact with that receptor as well. So that's what these new ones are that they're talking about there. And that's actually a pretty up-to-date slide. It makes me want to go and have a look at all those new ones now. But anyway, didn't have time to do that. And here we go. There's our cannabinoid producer and supplier up there. And that's what's delivered to the baby in breastfeeding. And we're trying to say that cannabis is harmful to babies. If babies don't get the natural endocannabinoids from their mums, they don't thrive. So it's something that, like, it's always going to be contentious. Anything to do with, you know, pregnancy, birth, the newborn period, all of that sort of stuff. But look, honestly, if the mother uses cannabis, it just wouldn't bother me at all. Pregnancy, birth, I mean, we should be using it in childbirth, for God's sake. You know, there are no permanent sequelae that's going to happen to a baby if they get some cannabis in the breast milk. They're already getting it. It is a natural part of our bodies. So any mum out there who's had a toke while they're pregnant or breastfeeding, forgive yourselves, for God's sake, because you haven't done anything wrong. You know, we have been brainwashed. Good. Okay, so that just shows you the network of receptors and what the... Now, if anyone wants to copy this, by the way, and they got a USB, like, please grab me outside and we can copy the talk, because I think a few people probably want these memes. So we've already talked about that. Next slide this is just looking at the various components, the various different cannabinoids and what they can do. That is but... Like, we're up to 140-something cannabinoids by now. So, you know, cannabis medicine is in fact in its infancy. But luckily, because of its safety profile, it's it's fine to use trial and error. You know, and this is what the medical profession just can't seem to get through their heads. You can't measure it the same way as you can a single molecule drug. You can't do double-blind randomised controlled trials. Because we're never going to prescribe cannabis in isolation anyway. Because we're good healers, we will give them a holistic treatment program. The cannabis would just be part of that. So how the hell do you put that into a scientific study? So we need to get it through the medical profession's head that N=1 studies are fine, where each patient is their own study, and you simply collect data on what happens to them. And you can make that a longitudinal observational study and follow a group of patients over time. The amount of data that you would generate will also generate our guidelines for treatment. And that's all we need, because the person who actually decides their treatment ultimately is the patient. The healer, the doctor, the naturopath, the herbalist, whoever is there to just guide you, to give you a starting point, tell you what to watch out for, and take it from there. But you're the one that has to come back and say, oh, look, you know, I'm not sleeping very well at night on this one. You know, the other one seemed good, but... And you have a look, oh, maybe there's too much sativa strain in it. Let's make it a bit more indica heavy. So we change it over and let them go home and try that. And they'll come back and say, oh, that one worked a treat. Okay, I mean, in an ideal world, we could give them a prescription for seeds and... oh, don't do it to me. No, it's just mine.
Yeah, but don't worry about it.
Oh, no, but I can't see what I'm doing then. Oh, yes, I can. Next slide. I'm embarrassed now, God. Now, this is another interesting thing about cannabis. You know how we're talking about its addictive potential? And how it's just the same as the general population. It's because we don't develop a physical tolerance to cannabis. Any tolerance that develops is actually just temporary. And all you have to do to clear any tolerance is go without for a few days. And so, hence this meme, and the old stoners out here, all the ones that'll get a giggle out of this, out of weed, let's just call it a tolerance break. Resetting our receptors. And that's exactly what it does. And so that's what happens, you know, you'll have got this, you know, you'll have smoked it and you will start to smoke a bit more by the time you've finished it, you know. And you might not get a bit more for a little while. And you'll find the first smoke that you had in the next lot, you're on your ass. Yeah, how did that happen? It's because your receptors have reset themselves. You just overdosed yourself. And so that's what makes it, you know, a very, very safe thing to use long term. Because you're not going to... The reason we had a problem with it in the 90s was because of the hydroponic weed, where they had forced the THC up and it was completely devoid of CBD. And when you have an unopposed cannabinoid, you will get adverse effects. You can get more paranoia, you can get drug-induced psychosis, you can get a withdrawal syndrome. But with medical cannabis that's organically grown, and with no chemicals, and you know they're not doing anything to tamper with the plant, then it's really only, you know, your 100% sativas that you really have to worry about paranoia. And again, horses for courses. Okay, so cannabis and your health. And that, I just like the colours in this actually. And so basically that's what it can do. That's just a few of the things it can do. Next slide. And that's a very busy slide. But if you want to get a copy of the talk, it's a really great one that's got lots of information on it. Next slide. So Mummy, Daddy, why is cannabis still illegal? Next slide. Okay, well, the government's owned by corporations, run by psychopaths, lying about an imaginary economy based on debt, fueled by illegal wars, destroying ecosystems, poisoning our food, and we go on. But should we really say that to a child? So next slide. Mummy, is cannabis dangerous? Well, son, that depends on who you ask. If you're someone who profits from imprisoning, poisoning, or exploiting human beings, then it's very dangerous. But the truth is the plant is a powerful medicine and can heal the planet in many respects. But unfortunately, it would end the profitability of a handful of greedy people in power. Next slide. Daddy, why is cannabis illegal?
Well, son, legalising the cannabis plant could free us from oil dependence, stop deforestation, become a safe alternative to many pharmaceuticals, and would cause prisons to shut down. Now, do you understand? Next slide. So we have this crazy situation of inconsistencies and utter hypocrisy. As you can see, okay, doc, step away from the mildly psychoactive weed or lose your licence to prescribe highly addictive and sometimes deadly opioids. Next slide. If we tolerated your pot use, next we'd be legalising hemp, which would threaten my investments in synthetic fabrics, plastics, pesticides, oil prisons, etc. I have no choice but to jail you for 30 years. That's self-explanatory. And I thought this was quite an interesting one. I'll just give you time to absorb it. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And we've exhausted all conventional methods. One last desperate option is to put you on an alternative natural medicine that has a 96% success rate. Oh, the irony. So, once again, we have our legal versus illegal thing. So, there you go. That's the people that have died from prescription opioids. And that's the people who have died from cannabis use. Not much comparison, really, is there? And so why is this normal? I use coffee in the morning for energy and wine at night to relax. But this is criminal. I use sativa in the morning for energy and indica at night to relax. Makes you think. And smoking weed doesn't make me a bad person. Just like going to church doesn't make you a good one. If a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to do so. And a fairly famous chap said that. And I can't believe we're still protesting this fucking shit. Because here we are. Because this is what we're getting. La 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 la, I can't hear you. You know, I mean, is that not our government? Here we have human rights and common sense, scientific and medical evidence, and that's what we're getting. And this is what we still have. Especially in Queensland. Next slide, please. So this is Queensland. This is what we face. Now, it looks really good on there, like a drop of 5.8% in the arrests from one thing to the next. But have a look how many there friggin' were. What, 25,000? As compared to, let's see, Victoria with 9,700. And New South Wales, the next most rabid state. Have a look at that. So, any reason that this is the next thing that happens? And that's what we're up against. So you really believe that nature got it wrong, and in 1937 a bunch of corrupt politicians got it right. Next slide. And so basically, what do you get when you cross corporate executives, lobbyists and politicians? Criminalising hemp. And we're really facing now exactly what was faced 70, 80 years ago. I mean, I thought, because there were a few gateway ones, I thought, oh, you know how they go on, look, it's a gateway drug. Well, if you didn't have to buy it where you buy your ice, maybe it wouldn't be. Jesus. Again, common sense. But anyway, it's a gateway rug. Just a little play on words for that one. Next one. Cannabis is not an entrance drug, it is an exit drug from pharmaceuticals and narcotics. And that was, a doctor actually said that. And for 100 years they said it was the gateway drug, now they want to be the dealer. Next one. And in Colorado, they're certainly, that's just in the first 6 months of legalisation. So, you know, these states have got, they're on the right track. I mean, they know that I mean, this is the golden goose.
Steve, do you want me to read that?
No, that's fine. Yeah, it's just, it's really just to show that...
Just saying less crime, less homicides, less violence.
Oh, I thought they could get it from the little pickies. Use your imaginations. Haven't you just had your joint for the morning? God. Okay, next slide. Yeah. Yeah, think of it as the cost of freedom. And this is exactly what we've got now. You know, I worked out from one of those price lists that if you bought an ounce of this legal bud, it's sort of like $600 or $700 an ounce. Like, for God's sake, no wonder we need a green market.